Super good to be back with the community breakfast event here at Maria 01. This is the first one for the fall edition, and we're just about to get started with the program. But maybe a bit of a introduction what the Breckies are all about. And I can also see some of our lovely new members who have joined us during the summer. I see Startmore there in the corner. We have Flockin, we have Pet Hotel, and many more new members. So all new members, please raise your hands up. Shy people, but you are here. Super good to have you all over. Maria 01 Community Breckies are all about bringing people together, start the morning together over some nice breakfast, get to know peers, get to know other Maria 01 members, and also people from our extended community. So also, welcome to all of you here. Breckies also are about learning about new things, and as you know, today we're talking about PR ABC for early stage startups with our lovely service provider partner, San Francisco, who will be taking you through the show. Before I get them on stage, I just want to give a heads up to all Maria 01 members, if you can stand up and raise up your hands. So you see who are the team members of Maria 01. So if you have any questions afterwards, want to talk with us, we are here to help you. But let's kick off the program, and I want to introduce on stage Reetta Ila, who will take over the show. Welcome, Reetta.
Ooh. Well, thank you. That's very kind. Good morning, everyone. So good to see you all here. We were a bit nervous. We're like, okay, breakfast quite early after summer. Let's see if anyone shows up. Super happy to see you all here to learn a bit about like the basics of PR. We will discuss it in quite a depth today. So let's see how the program looks. So the hosts today are obviously Maria 01, as you know, then San Francisco Agency, and Valosan, who I will introduce in just a bit. The agenda of today, I will quickly introduce all of the panelists and the topics of the day. Then we will hear a keynote from lovely Kim Oguilve, who has been doing PR for a startup. She works right now. Then we have a panel discussion with great panelists who I will introduce in just a bit. At the end, we will have about 15 to 20 minutes time for a Q&A session. So please do raise your hand and ask questions. There's no such thing as silly or stupid questions. So this is your chance to really get the most out of these people who are absolute professionals when it comes to getting earned media and getting journalists interested in you. So without the further ado, let's quickly see who is here today. So yes, indeed, that does look like me. Name is Reetta Ilo, and I am a senior PR and comms manager at San Francisco Agency. I lead our startup and investor comms. So yeah, if you ever need help with comms strategy or PR strategy or getting yourself in the earned media in Finland, but mostly globally, you can come and talk to me later on. I've been a happy member of the Maria 01 community ever since it was launched back in 2017. Used to work for FIBAN, Finnish Business Angels Network, before joining the San Francisco team. Quickly, just about San Francisco Agency. So we are the most international PR and comms agency in Finland, at least that's what we like to claim. We have a team of professionals who execute everything from comms strategy to PR strategy to actual PR operations and media monitoring and so on. We work with clients such as Aura Ring, maybe someone has heard, Relic Solutions, Codits.io, Futurize, On a Go Bio Deal, and etc. Over 250 new Nordic companies throughout the years. Then we have Valosan, the other host of today. Valosan is the most powerful PR software. So PR has been, up until now, quite a lot of manual work. So Valosan really automates your PR workflow, helps you build relationships with the journalist. I think we have the Valosan team here somewhere. They could raise their hands. Where are they? There's one, and then there's the other one over there in the back, Joanna, in the blue shirt. So go ahead and talk about Valosan if you're interested to see how software can help you execute PR. So today's panelists, as said, first up we have panelist / keynote speaker Kim Oguilve, who leads Revive's global comms and PR. She has worked with global PR initiatives and worked with clients like Shiseido, A.S. Watson Group, Number 7 Beauty Company, Bulldog Skincare, and so on. Kim used to also be the lead brand, she used to lead brand and comms and marketing at Maria01. Revieve, the company she works for, is the partner to brands and retailers worldwide to deliver a digitally driven, personalized brand experience leveraging state-of-the-art AR technology. What a mouthful. I absolutely needed my notes for that. The company's proprietary technology is the Revive Digital Health Beauty Wellness Platform, which features easy-to-use self-diagnostic modules that personalize search and shopping experience by delivering consumers targeted products, services, and treatments. Okay, maybe you talk to Kim later on again if you're interested in what Revive does. Then we have Anna Brchisky. Anna is an entrepreneur, founder of 04 Comms and PR agency. She's like a single powerhouse for PR, so she executes everything herself when it comes to PR strategies and PR opportunities. She has been working in the Nordic startup ecosystem already for years and works with some of the most well-known investors and startups in the community. And her Nordic boutique PR and comms agency is called 04, and they deliver what is needed from strategic communications to content creation and PR to digital marketing and fast. Finally, I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, Tim Gilbert, Senior PR and Comms Manager at San Francisco agency. He's a British person living in Finland, closeted Welshman, some might say, but no, I guess he's truly English. He's our leading English copywriter and is really a professional when it comes to writing about really, really technical, difficult technologies and so on, and bringing the story to the journalists so that their audience, so the readers, are really engaged. All right. So that was my little starting off the day. Without the further ado, I would like to invite Kim to the stage. Kim, give a big hand.
Well, good morning. I must say that it is a bit scary to be here after such a long time. As Reta was saying, I used to work at Maria, approximately 2 years ago, and I worked in the community for around 4 years as the chief marketing officer, and part of the work was actually introducing about the community to a lot of delegations. So it feels strange to be here because I haven't been doing these kinds of presentations in such a long time. Really shortly about me. So what you have to know is that I'm from Costa Rica. I mean, I've been living in Finland for the past 10 years, and my background is in marketing and communications. My work experience, as mentioned, has been as part of the startup community, but most recently as part of a technology company, Revieve, where I currently lead all our communications. Now, about Revieve. So at Revieve, what we do today is that we are supporting beauty brands and retailers in personalizing the shopping experience for their customers. And we do that by utilizing artificial intelligence and augmented reality. You can see here some of the beauty brands and retailers that we actually work with today. I'm sure some of these names are quite familiar to you. For example, Shiseido, a very well-known Japanese cosmetics brand. living proof. I'm sure you all know about Kicks. I mean, we have Kicks, I think it's in city center, and of course in other parts of Finland as well. And well, as a company, we've already been featured in some of the world's leading beauty, business, and trade media. For example, The Telegraph, WWD, Glossy, Cosmetics Business, Beauty Matter, well, basically, you name it. Now, I was thinking, okay, what should I present about, today? And, I initially want to share with you a little bit about how does the PR function is actually organized in our company today. And then I'm going to share a little bit about some of the key learnings that I think it's important for me to share with you. I'm guessing many of you are founders or startup operators and, well, overall people from the community. So PR at Revieve, the what, how, but also the why. PR at Revieve, for us, it's really about building and managing relationships with the press and analysts. So if we go to a very basic level, the press could basically mean many different roles in, for example, a particular publication. So for us, it's really about reaching out to, for example, journalists, reporters, could also be freelance writers, could be features writers. So all these different roles are sometimes part of the publications that we actually pitch to. And the reason why I also mention analysts, even though it's not, I would say, key function of the whole press relations, is because as a B2B company, there are in the market, for example, research companies like Forrester, that what they usually do as analysts is that they have to, of course, research the market and figure out who are some of the interesting technology companies that might be coming up for a particular vertical. So many of these research companies and the reports that they actually produce are being read by some of our key target buyers. And usually these kinds of target buyers, you will find them reading, reports such as the Forrester one. So for us, it's really important that we actually target both the press, but also analysts. And the way that we target analysts is very similar to how we would actually treat the press. So basically, once in a while, sending them some of our press releases and so on and so forth. Now, how we've actually managed to, well, start building these relationships and pitching to the press, what we realized as a company is that in order for us to be able to effectively target the global market in which we actually operate, which is beauty, we decided that it was important for us to actually build an in-house PR team. And actually part of that team is here today in the audience. So my colleague Vitalia is here with me. And basically me and her are the ones that lead this communications department in the company. However, in the next slide that I will show a bit later, I will show more details on how that team is actually distributed, because we utilize also the help from PR agencies. The reason why we actually decided to go the PR agency way is because in some cases, well, not in some cases, but when you're actually trying to target a global market, it's almost like humanly impossible to want to, for example, be present in all the key markets and expecting to have, that level of impact, because those agencies might actually have some of those local connections and they can also advise us on what would be the best way forward. And why we actually do PR at Revieve, and this is my favorite point that I really wanted to, get to explaining. I think you hear a lot of the time, like, okay, why to do PR? And I think a lot of people say, like, yes, to build your reputation and credibility. And exactly that is one of the reasons why we do it, but I want to actually break it down to you. So what does reputation for us actually means is that whenever we, for example, reach out to a journalist or a reporter, how we know that we are being known for the things that we are actually pitching to that reporter is whenever they actually publish and we see that, hey, what we've actually been pitching is being covered and we're actually being covered for the right things that we want to strengthen as a company. And so that is basically a super easy way to understand, like, whether your positioning as a company is actually being used appropriately in the media. And then credibility for us, and actually a very good way for us to measure that, is you know, when you start doing PR, and because it's going to take a lot of time for you to get there and for you to get coverage, a good way to actually understand whether or not you're being credible in your pitch and whether or not journalists actually support in a way what you're doing or like believe you is whenever they come back to you and they ask you for comments about, for example, things that are happening in the industry at large. So if that wouldn't happen, it's very difficult for us to know whether or not we're actually, you know, becoming a credible company. And I think this is somewhat easy way of measuring, you know, that credibility, that they always come back to you to ask for your opinion. And then the other one, which I think is, well, tied to the company as a whole and even a bit to sales. But why we also do it is because it's such a great way to actually build awareness around your company and generate demand. So especially if you are a new company in the market, and especially if you're early stage and maybe there isn't that much traction around what you do, I think that starting to build, you know, your PR program is a really great way of pushing the market to start talking about that specific thing that you do a little bit more. And also our CMO really loves to talk about awareness and generating demand. So PR is really like a top of funnel kind of strategy. As I was mentioning, so how our team looks like today. So here in number one, this is me and my colleague, and basically what we do today is that we basically manage all this network of PR agencies and also freelancers. In North America, we have our lead agency, and that's also our key market. In Latin America, we are not targeting whole Latin America, but we're focusing just in 3 countries, France, UK, and Japan. We work with freelancers, and also we get the help from our Japanese country lead, who helps us mainly with translating materials, and also we do a lot of paid media distribution in Japan, which I think we're going to talk about later, when it's a good time, or should you actually do paid media distribution at all rather than, you know, earning that. Now about my top 3 learnings. I wanted to mention this, that PR is more than a one-off funding announcement, because I think that, you know, for me in the startup community, and I'm sure also for you as a startups, like, I mean, what a better way to start, you know, building those relationships and getting that attention than, you know, actually reaching out to journalists and trying to get that first funding announcement out. I think the issue just kind of lies when that is the only thing that you do. And why I say it's an issue, it's because, well, first of all, getting a funding announcement nowadays also published in the media, it gets harder and harder. I mean, you have seen ticket sizes are pretty crazy nowadays, so it's very difficult to actually get that attention. And I think that there are even some publications that might not even publish funding rounds, let's say for under 5 million. So if this is the only thing that you actually focus on, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. How I want you to actually think about PR today is about a program. And I mean, about a program meaning as a long-term strategy that you actually utilize to start building that company's reputation and credibility. I can tell you how we actually do this at Revieve today, so that you get like a really concrete way on how to think about this. So what are the things that can actually be stories inside the company? So first of all, we close new clients. What a great way to actually announce that collaboration with a client, especially if they are a really big client. As I mentioned, we've worked on announcing our collaboration with clients already, like Shiseido, number 7 beauty companies, like really big names. So trying to get that client to actually say yes to that press announcement is a really great way of, well, basically building on, that is just one area. Another area can, for example, be case studies. I mean, I'm sure that case studies are a part of the things that you do as a company, because what a better way to obviously show the results that you can actually achieve for your clients by sharing some data. In some cases, that can actually be a really good idea, and we've done it with some of the clients that we've announced, and then to sort of build on the story how, let's say, the experience or the product that we developed together with them is performing, you can build on that story, right? A third thing can, for example, be, let me think, well, thought leadership. And actually, I have a screenshot of our thought leadership agenda. And this is just thought leadership. So meaning these are some of the topics that we have, for example, mapped out that we feel are connected to the industry at large and that we see the media talk about all the time. So obviously when you think about us, okay, like beauty tech, I mean, can we actually talk about, well, skincare trends, future of retail, holiday, what to give to people? Well, actually, yes, you can. So I think one of the exercises that you should do inside of your company today, and you know, if you are thinking like whether or not to jump into this PR wagon, just do this as an exercise to think like, what are those storytelling opportunities that you have? Like just standing in your company today, and you'll start to see that there is more to your company than actually meets the eye. And actually many of these topics today, I mean, I would say that for at least perhaps 5 of them, we've managed to get some placements in some publications just by offering our point of views. My learning number 2, and I'm not sure if this is going to be a bit controversial, but I think that when you work in PR, they will tell you like relationships are everything. You have to go ahead and like all the journalists post so that they actually notice you, and then it's easier in a way for you to perhaps get that attention. But well, the true story for me at least has been that when I joined the company Revieve, I did not know anybody from the beauty industry, and I really mean that. I wasn't even wearing skincare, and that is one of the key things that we actually do as a company. So actually getting to learn about this whole beauty industry and everything that is part of it has really been like a huge learning experience for me. And I don't think that you always need to have existing relationships to increase the chances of you getting coverage, because that would be like saying it doesn't matter what I pitch is going to get through, and actually that's not the reality. So I think like even for me, like 90-100% of the time, if you come to a journalist with a really good pitch that actually is sharing something newsworthy and that is going to make them look good, they're going to peak on that. So don't be afraid of actually just reaching out, because it's happened to us in the company. I joined, and I think that what we just started doing was that, starting to build our PR program and trying to figure out which are some of the key publications, not just also the big publications that you see everywhere, like Wired and Fast Company. Of course, those are great. There is usually more competition for those, but also, for example, if you're a B2B SaaS company, look also into local trade publications, because local trade publications are great if you're trying to reach a specific, set of buyers, because those are some of the things that they also read, because they want to know, hey, what is my competitor launching today, tomorrow? So this is actually a really good, strategy. Look also into trade publications and not just like the global business media. And then the last learning point, getting the key people in your company to understand what you do. So in here, I actually mean the whole company, because I think PR is such a misunderstood area inside the company. So obviously one of the ways for you to get that acknowledgement, for example, I don't know, the CEO or the leadership team, is by actually aligning on what are the metrics that are driving the strategy. So obviously in PR, it's always very difficult to try to, think of aligning your metrics. So let's say that it would drive revenue or drive leads, because it is actually very difficult to measure. So if you actually remember that PR is mainly a top of funnel kind of strategy to generate awareness and demand, then you can, for example, think of aligning on metrics such as share of voice, the potential reach, the total amount of media mentions. Share of voice has actually been quite an interesting metric for us. For example, share of voice, what it tells you is the portion that you basically share with your competitors in the media. And we usually measure this with our biggest competitor. So let's say every month we might check, okay, how much is this? I'm not going to say the name so you don't check them out. So how much is this company driving in the media this month. So we actually see like how much discussion is happening around us and them. And then also the potential reach, I think this is also a really good metric that is also kind of tied to that top of funnel strategy in marketing, that it's really good for you to understand the amount of reach that all the publications where you're being covered actually are having, so that you can also share that with, I don't know, your CEO or also even the marketing team, like, hey, this month the total reach of our publications has been, X, Y, and Z. And then also media mentions, because that's also very, credible and like tangible, that you can show, hey, this month we actually managed to get featured in X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. But I think that was all. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have questions. I definitely would have wanted to share so much more, because I was like, it's so difficult to just condense everything in these 3 points, but I hope this was useful, and please ask me more. And my colleague also, who is here, you should show your face. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. So, moving on to the next stage, which was, as promised, a panel discussion with a Q&A following up. So, still give a big hand for Anna and Tim. I probably forgot to say something very important. I'm gonna give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. Once again, there was also someone who came a bit late, so Anna, please go ahead.
Yes, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm this PR consultant slash entrepreneur slash consultant slash one woman powerhouse doing everything from events to PR to marketing. And yeah, I work with a lot of tech companies from the Nordics and also investors. I work with Oura's European comms and PR, for example, OpenOcean, and a lot of Lifeline Ventures portfolio companies. You may have known about Huva or Veri or Flowrite. And yeah, that was about me. Let's keep it short.
Perfect, thank you. Tim, go ahead.
Yes, hello. So my name's Tim Gilbert. I'm a British guy, as described earlier, and closeted Welshman. So born in Wales, raised in England, and I've been at San Francisco agency for 5 years. So I'm the lead English copywriter there. So I help our clients, tell their stories to the world. So that means getting everything in place content-wise, but then also, making that strategy for how we're actually going to kind of get the press interested in this, and then operationally going away and doing it. So building those relationships, pitching, distributing, all these different kinds of things.
Perfect, thank you. So we do have a few warm-up questions. Thank you also those who sent in some questions earlier on when you were signing up. We will get to those as well and have live questions. So, but let's start with some warm-up questions. So we've been talking a lot about like earned media hits and media hits. So would you guys want to explain to our audience again, like what is an earned media hit? Maybe Anna wants to start.
Very shortly, not paid. That's an earned media hit is something you earn with your story, with your pitch in a media that is journalistically free. Let's say Helsingin Sanomat, Bloomberg. They write about you because your story matters and it's a good story. And yeah, it's free.
Perfect. So maybe to follow up on that, I guess then it comes down to, okay, what is then newsworthy? Like what kind of a story would a journalist pick up? Kim, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a newsworthy story, I think in our case, it has been quite many things. So it could be anything from whenever we launch a new product that we've been co-developing with one of our clients. That is newsworthy because it's something new by default. I mean, funding rounds are obviously newsworthy as long as they are very big amounts of money. But I think that in a way, anything that kind of like impacts culture, society at large, and that might, make people's hearts tick and the journalist excited about like, oh my God, this is really something I have not seen before. I think that's something, newsworthy.
Yeah, exactly. And at San Francisco agency, we do have a few kind of a tick boxes. So it needs to be timely. It needs to be something that happens right now. It needs to be something unique, something new, even something surprising, something that, you know, the audience and the journalist goes like, oh, I haven't heard that before. Tim, do you have something to add up on that?
No, I just think basically it has to be something that is new. There is something occurring. Journalists don't like to write stories just about your company. They don't kind of serve companies, they serve their readers. So there has to be something there for them to actually report. And I think, you know, you can really think outside of the box when it comes to doing PR though. So it doesn't just have to be like a product launch or a new customer. There are other avenues you can go down as well. When it comes to doing like newsworthy stuff. So
yeah, so having the thing that kind of breaches the step of being newsworthy, but then maybe building a story around it as well, something that makes it more relevant for them. So then actually Kim already kind of brushed very gently on the topic of PR newswires. So maybe you have seen like someone maybe sent you an email like, hey, pay 200 euros and your press release will be in Kauppalehti or in whatever. So could we discuss those a bit? Are they controversial or are they not? So Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they are a tool for a press release, but you know, it comes down to the fact that you don't want to just distribute your press release. Like that's not effective PR at all. What you want to do is you want to reach out to 1 or 2 or 3 journalists beforehand, depending on the news. You want to pitch the story personally. You want to pitch it that in a way that the journalist gets excited. And when the story comes out, then you're going to support that distribution with the press release, let's say Cision or STT or whatever. Sometimes there are good results from that as well. I did Hawks Hunt's funding round during the spring, and we had a lot of inbound come from that because we did a large Cision newswire distribution in the US as well. So there was some inbound that came from it. But how we got these stories out, that was through pitching and pre-pitching specifically.
Yeah, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Anna as well. I think in our case as a company, it's something that you should never do as your strategy. So meaning like you have to deploy both earned and paid media and then kind of like understanding what you actually use paid media for. I think that in some cases, because for some of the, let's say, partner announcements that we've done, I think that in some countries, actually, the wire can come in very handy. As I mentioned, for example, Japan, we've been doing a lot of like media outreach there, but it's very difficult when you don't actually speak Japanese. So in Japan particularly, we've done quite a lot of paid media distribution. And then in the US, some of our clients also just take it as a given that, for example, Business Wire is included in the overall outreach alongside the media outreach that we would do, like pitching to the client. And actually, we've turned both the earned and paid media aspect of it into quite attractive way of how to lure, you know, those clients that might be a bit hesitant, like, I don't want to, like, you know, go public with you. So we actually created a whole program and we sort of like offer this as part of their package. You know, if you go public with us, it's just going to go as a blast everywhere. And yeah, I think you should use both in sync to support the earned media aspect of it, but not as the only part of the strategy.
And I also want to add, sometimes if you're an early stage startup, do you think if it's at all necessary? If actually what you want to do is just kind of pitching directly to journalists, because that's, you know, that's 700 euros for STT, and that's 2.5K for Cision for a wide distribution. So sometimes it's also like kind of cost effective of not choosing to do that.
Yeah, for sure. We have also used newswires. That's usually not the way we go. But for example, sometimes to get yourself into a new market, as said, like Japan or Germany, where you might struggle at first get media visibility when you don't have the relevancy in the market yet. So the journalists are less likely to pick you up. So then at least you have materials in German that, you know, if someone like a potential client or someone Googles you, they will find. All right. Well, then actually something that I think it's interesting, we have a couple of agencies here and we have an in-house person. So for early stage companies, that's probably something that you're thinking like, should I do it myself or should I hire an agency? So what do you guys think? Tim, go.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you have to make the decision that is right for you. So even though I'm from an agency, I won't always advocate that working with an agency is the best thing. It has to definitely be part of your overall strategy. And ultimately, I think there's like a balance you have to be like, what you have to think about with your time. So founders' time is often short, so you can, you know, help, give the agency work to help with the heavy lifting, and they can really like help you out with kind of like turnkey processes. So like they've got maybe a thing in place for how we execute a campaign with the press, but that might not necessarily be the best thing for you. It might be like in-house is best because for a number of reasons, but like, you know, cost could be one thing. If the agency prices are too high, that's very understandable, but also being a founder is like a unique thing, and you can create relationships with journalists just as well being a founder as you can being like an agency person. So like Kim said in her keynote, it's not all just relationships and existing relationships, it's going out and forming new ones. And obviously an agency can help with that. And if you have the time in-house to do it, then great. But I think there's no right or wrong, it's what's best for you.
Right. Well, maybe Kim has, because you do it both in-house and with the agencies.
Yeah, I think that honestly, in my experience now, what I've seen also working with agencies, honestly, I mean, I love them and we couldn't do what we do today and the results we've achieved without them. But I think an aspect that we have to remember is that agencies also work with many clients. And the thing is that you need that internal accountability in your company to make sure that the agencies always have what they need. Because previously, when, for example, I wasn't part of the company and we had only an agency and it was a CEO then doing everything, kind of managing the agency. So I don't think that's perhaps, let's say, the most time efficient way, and perhaps that's not the best way to spend the CEO's time, kind of like managing the agency and like monitoring, like, hey, did they use the positioning correct and so on. So I do think you need to have some internal accountability in your team, because honestly, even though we love our agencies, there are always some things that we need to fix, because we really need to get that positioning right, because if we don't, then it's just not what we are supposed to be actually talking about. So yeah, I think there needs to be some internal accountability. I don't mean to say you have to have like a big, communications team, but I think someone other than the CEO should take responsibility for at least managing the agency relationships if you were to hire an agency.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe Anna could still continue a bit, because you also work with very early stage companies that come to you and they need help. What is kind of the expectation level, and do you need to do some expectation management?
Oh yeah, so every time I talk with a new client early stage, it's like, okay, so we raised $1 million. Can we get to Forbes, TechCrunch, Bloomberg, anything? And the fact is that no, it's really difficult, especially for an early stage startup. Your story is new, your product is new. You might not have international clients yet. You might not have the international kind of recognition for your name yet. So yeah, setting the expectations about if you're an early stage company. I would advise, please use some external help, be that a freelancer, be that an agency, just because when you're building your company, you have so much other stuff to do. You might not have the time. I mean, there's a reason why PR is a title and a profession. Like, it takes time to craft the message. It takes time to promote and pitch your story to the journalist. So please use some external help. And I think that's also the kind of the most cost-effective way of doing PR as an early-stage company, because agencies can be quite expensive, but also at the same time, you know, CEO can't do it everything like themselves.
Yeah, exactly. If you guys are big podcast fans, I'm gonna drop a little marketing message here that we at San Francisco have actually created a free podcast that is available at sanfrancisco.fi. There we interview journalists. We have interviewed journalists from BBC, from Sifted, and so on. And what the Sifted journalist told me at Slush was like, don't start PR too early. Like because it is that top of the funnel sort of a marketing thing. It takes a lot of time and effort and money. So don't take it as like your first thing you need to execute. There's a lot of other things you need to do first.
Can I disagree on that a little bit?
Yes,
like,
you can.
Okay, don't start PR too early. Don't do the kind of wide distribution. Don't put in like 20K a month for an agency. But what you need to do from the very beginning is start to think of your story and talk with journalists. And that's a part of PR, which, you know, that builds the base for your kind of activities later on. And, you know, it doesn't hurt if you know, send a message to a, let's say, Elina Lappalainen from Helsingin Sanomat, just letting her know about maybe something that's happening at your company. So yeah, start
Good,
there.
very good addition, definitely. Tim, go.
Yeah, that leads me on to kind of a point that I don't think maybe it's like reasonable to expect every little company development to be a big story, but it's definitely worth keeping the journalists up to date with your company so that when the time is right for them, then they go, hey, now actually I've got enough pieces of this puzzle to put together a really nice story about your company. And like this latest thing that you've now done is the kind of thing that is going to give me the reason to now talk about all of them. So I think definitely like reach out to a journalist like Mike Butcher from TechCrunch or someone and just keep them up to date. You know, it doesn't even need to be anything where you expect something back. Just, hey, I thought I'd let you know about this new thing that we're doing, and just be good to keep it in mind.
Yeah, good additions. Okay, let's talk a tiny bit before moving on to the questions that came in beforehand. But the different kinds of like PR activities, because we all know, okay, press release. So you write like company X, Y, and Z did X, Y, and Z. But what is this thought leadership thing? Like that's something that I feel like it's picking up also in the Finnish ecosystem, like understanding of the value of it. So who would like to, in a nutshell, explain quickly what is thought leadership and how you can do it through PR? Who would like to start?
I can of course share a little bit about this because we actually do a lot of thought leadership. I think what it would mean for me is really about engaging in meaningful discussions about expertise that, for example, our spokespeople in the company might have. So as an example, our CEO, of course, beyond what he knows in beauty tech, he knows a lot about digital transformation, also about what does the personalization trend has to do with sustainability. So if you remember those, for example, topics that I shared with you, so those are our thought leadership topics. And in many cases, we might, for example, develop an opinion piece for a publication. We have to pitch it to the publication. You know, is this something that they would be interested in? And in some cases, we, for example, use his membership at Forbes Councils, which actually it's a paid opportunity that let's say like specific people have to share their thought leadership with the world. So in a way, it's really about raising the profile of that specific person around his expertise topics. Yeah.
Perfect. Anna, go ahead. You kind of see.
No,
like
I was just thinking of a kind of tangible way of explaining, like more tangible way. So opinion pieces, pitches that have to do about your opinions, events, anywhere you can be visible. Those are the ways to build your leadership or thought leadership. It's just about getting your opinions out, your kind of vision, your thinking out. One of the easy way of doing that is Sifted. That they take opinion pieces, Forbes, as you mentioned, but also Helsingin Sanomat takes opinion pieces, and talouselämä, for example, debatti. So there's a few placements you can think of.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's, I think it's a key when you think who would be the one that starts to build that thought leader profile in your company. If you are the founder, you are the CEO, but be very honest with yourself. Like, am I brave enough to give these like opinions about stuff? Because you need to have an opinion, right? Everybody does have one, but be also brave. Like, I feel in a lot of Finnish startups, sometimes you need to push, like, it's okay, you can give predictions to 2023 and they might all go wrong. It doesn't matter, it's just about having an opinion. So it can be someone else than the CEO. Usually it is the CEO in an early stage company, but especially when you grow, if you have a very, opinionated CTO, might be also her or him. Tim, do you have anything to add to thought leadership? I know that you've been carving a lot of those in the past.
Yeah, it's something that we regularly do at the agency. So like we were speaking before, you don't always have news to announce. So thought leadership is a great way to kind of fill the gaps when you haven't got something really going on. And I think we all have expertise and we can all share it. And, we look online for these things like how to do, like better digital transformation in our company, how to make it succeed, or why is it failing, or all these kinds of things. And when you go online and you search for these things, you find these leaders who help you out. They give you like learning, they give you advice, they give you tips and expertise. And I think we can all do better at sharing our own expertise, and it's a really great way of doing it, and it's also a really great way of raising your profile as a company and as an individual.
Yeah, maybe you could share, like Anna already mentioned a couple of places, but maybe you could mention a couple of international medias that do take these kind of thought leadership articles in.
Yeah, so for example, the Enterprises Project is really great for like SaaS businesses. There's like the Training Journal, they take them. Insights for Professionals, there's all different kinds of ones. They don't all have to be the Forbeses and like the Fast Companies of the world. They can be these more industry trade media kinds of places. They're just as valuable, and they might even be more focused on your target audience. So one really great tip, I think, to find these is to go onto Google and kind of type in like digital transformation plus contribute, and then you'll get all the results of places that accept contributed articles for that topic.
Yeah, okay, I think that's someone hopefully took notes of that, how to find those placements. So let's talk just a tiny bit about PR versus or together with marketing. It's kind of like, don't really want to say PR versus marketing, because usually PR is part of your marketing strategy, and especially KPIs. Because we know that in growth hacking, in digital marketing, setting numeric KPIs can be quite easy, but with PR it's a bit more difficult. So what would you guys say? How do you measure your success in PR?
Okay, everyone's looking at me. Well, PR, you can go with the numbers side. You can say, oh, okay, we got this many journalists wrote about us. This many journalists opened our pitch. This many journalists answered to us. But one of the things that makes PR or media KPIs more difficult is to also look at the kind of quality side. So sometimes you want to have the kind of focus on, okay, we want to get to Bloomberg and we want to get to Helsingin Sanomat. For example, that's what we did with Huva. They raised 5 million from General Catalyst. We knew that that's a too low of amount to get into all the media out there. So we set out our goals, which were ambitious. Bloomberg is a great quality publication, Helsingin Sanomat as well. We wanted to do interviews, and we wanted to have like a longer piece about Huva. And then we went after those. And that's kind of the KPIs I want to usually set. I want to do quality and numbers in terms of how many people we can reach in those medias. Yeah.
Actually, just a quick question on that, and we'll come back to the KPIs, but exclusive deals. That's
Yeah,
something.
so exclusive means, so there's a difference between embargoed and exclusive. Exclusive means that you are only going to give the story to that exclusive journalist. So let's say you have a funding round, you're pitching that to one journalist exclusively. There's also a question about, is it international exclusive, national exclusive? Sometimes international journalists don't really care about Finnish exclusives. But let's talk about exclusive. So that's an exclusive. Embargoed is that you have an embargo date set for the press release, meaning after that embargo date, it's wide for distribution, it's open for all. So sometimes you want to just give the story to one journalist if it's harder to pitch, or you just want to reach one specific media. And sometimes you want to pitch it under embargo to, let's say, 5 journalists from different medias to get the best results. Really also depends on what your clients or what your startup's goals are, what you want to do with the news story.
Thank you, Anna. I think that was maybe important thing to clarify. Back to KPIs. Kim, tell us, you guys must follow them quite strictly.
Yes, I think you can't avoid them, especially as an internal team that is part of the marketing team. I think that, there are so many things that you can actually measure in PR. And as I mentioned previously, when your CMO or let's say the lead of the marketing team and also the CEO understand the role of PR in the company, then it gets a bit easier to set those KPIs. So as I mentioned, when PR is sorry, I got confused. When PR is a top of the funnel strategy, then obviously it's more about awareness and generating that demand. So I think that some of the KPIs that you can, for example, tie in a way to that, for example, specific share of voice in some regions compared to your competitors, how much the media is talking about you compared to your competitors. That is one of the things that also give some peace of mind to the sales team, because they can see hey, actually this quarter we have been getting a higher share of voice than our competitors. So could that be somehow related to us, getting more inbound leads? So in a way, I think for us, how to measure PR is more about understanding the phenomenon of getting all that awareness and what does it actually mean in different parts of the organization. Another thing, for example, in Google Analytics, when you do a campaign, you can, for example, check the coverage that you've received and if there has been any traffic following that coverage. So that is one of the things that we actually learned recently from our CMO. So it has been great that sometimes when we've actually done these campaigns, we've received immediately the day after more traffic to the site compared to other days when we don't have any as much traffic, for example. So I think that it's more about understanding the PR phenomenon, that yes, it is a top of the funnel tactic, but let's discuss together with the PR team and also the marketing team what are some of those things that are actually realistic to measure and have a conversation around those. Yeah.
Yeah, good points. Tim, do you have something to add on?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great points here about how we measure maybe the media hits and all of that kind of stuff. I think at the agency we use objectives and key results, so OKRs, and they are for a 6-month period. So they are quite dynamic, and we can change them as needed to kind of see how we've done in the past 6 months, and then, okay, we were too ambitious or we were not ambitious enough and we can change them. But I think one part of the discussion is also when it comes to building relationships, how you're doing with that aspect of things. So there's no point making the same mistakes over and over again if they're not providing any results. So I think by having some kind of software or tool that can help you with your pitching and with your distribution, and you can check those response rates, you can see that, oh yeah, we got 15 people to reply to our pitch, so and of that 10 published, so it was actually a pretty good pitch. So then after that you can kind of see maybe what was the good elements of that pitch, and then you can compare it to another campaign where maybe not as many people published, and you go, okay, maybe was the news as good? Hard to say, but you can also just judge the quality of the relationships based on whether you're getting responses. Even no, I'm thank you for saying no, because you're giving me something in return. Often you just get nothing in reply, and it's the most frustrating thing ever. So having something that can say like yes, interested, positive, or no, I think is also great.
Yeah, we were laughing about it before this panel. We're like, getting that sweet no is super exciting in some ways. But yeah, maybe to summarize, I think one more thing is that PR is building brand awareness. It's not necessarily a sales tool. So coming back to those expectation managements, maybe if you do that funding round announcement, sometimes we do hear that, oh, well, we haven't really gotten any inbound leads yet. And it's like, well, this PR campaign the idea was not to get you 5 inbound leads or whatever. If that happens, it does happen as well, and that's great, but sales leads are not necessarily the KPIs to kind of follow with PR work. Okay, so we did have some questions come in beforehand. The role of social media in PR was one of the questions. Tim, would you like to say how social media and PR collide?
Yeah, so again, referring to the conversation about PR and marketing, so I think it's part of this like peso model, paid, earned, social, and owned, and they all have to work together to amplify each other. So you have to get them in balance between what you're paying for and what you're earning and what you're kind of like owning and what you're doing on social media. And definitely when PR comes in, when that article is written about your company, don't just let it kind of like fade into nothing. You really have to put your social channels to work and spread that message, amplify it, and the journalists will really appreciate it because they've also got to run their business. They got to make money, and they get money by visits, clicks, and advertising. So the more you can help them, the more they appreciate it, and it's definitely part of building that relationship. So definitely run ads with your story. Definitely share it, retweet it, thank them publicly, tag them. Really just do as much as you can with your social channels about your earned PR.
I think you summarized it quite well, because there's actually a big question, very easy one. I'm lucky, I'm just moderator here. Tips on getting press in Tier 1 US titles. So there's definitely one way to do that. No, there isn't. But maybe we have some insights. Maybe Anna would like to start.
Okay, well, learnings from Oda is it takes a lot of time. We just had a really good story come out in, was it Wired or somewhere, really like top tier media. And I talked with the comms team in the US and they were like, yeah, we were working for a year for that one piece, and it has had to do the story, but also kind of warming up the journalist to the story. So relationships are key. Working on it for a long time, not giving up, even if the journalist first says no. Honing your pitch further, maybe honing your story further, and then, if possible, meeting them in events. I mean, I know there's a lot of US journalists coming to Slush this year, a great place to kind of reach out to make that personal connection. But yeah, maybe one thing is like time. Nothing is going to happen in a few weeks. So keep reaching out, keep building that relationship, offer them stories, build your story. And you're going to get there.
What about Kim? You guys have been featured in some great publications. So
yes, we have. I think, of course, it has taken time. I mean, I've been in the company for a year and a half, and before that, we already had an agency who was, working with the CEO, trying to build on that relationship. But I also think that, I mean, of course, like if we are talking about, it also depends on the story, because I think, going back to the thought leadership aspect of things, I think like a very concrete way that you could also utilize to maybe get to some of those publications is that I follow a lot of people on Twitter that are actually asking for specific things. So sometimes they might be asking, do you know a person that knows X, Y, and Z? We also use like help a reporter out. We've actually managed to get a couple of quotes placed in some of those, for example, WWD articles and so on. So I think there are like a couple of like tactics that you can utilize to kind of like speed that up. Obviously, it's not going to be like a full, feature story about your company, but I mean, it could help. And I think it would obviously make your CEO happy if, you know, you at least get mentioned in some of these articles. So totally what Anna says, but yeah, perhaps also look into these, like Twitter, and help a reporter out. I also have another like really good one that I can share. It's actually like specific channel, and you get the notifications on Twitter whenever there is like changes in the, you know, journalists or reporters, like, hey, I'm starting at the Telegraph, send me stories around beauty and technology, for example. So then you engage with that, for example.
Yeah, that's really good. I also want to point out that in the US, being from Finland, being from the Nordics, don't be afraid of using that angle. That's huge right now. I think that's how we got the New York Times article with Oura, is that we were like pushing the Nordic Finnish angle. So don't be afraid to utilize that.
No, definitely not. As long as you have the relevancy, like that's where it comes down to. If you're a Finnish company operating in Finland, might be a bit difficult. Tim, quickly, any additions there?
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that what's the relevancy for the US audience, really? Because that has to be there, I think, for the journalists to really care. And yeah, I think really great points earlier. So especially when it comes to the pitching time, you know, you've got to give it a couple of weeks at least with that story that you've got on your table for it to really go through.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of like maybe going back to the story, like your product or your service or your company might be the coolest thing, at least in your opinion. Like, but for the journalists to really get excited is for you to build the narrative around the product, which shows the impact to people. And the bigger the impact, so the bigger the audience that your product affects. So journalists, for example, they do love like consumer products if it like affects, you know, big enough, you know, consumer, or if there's some consumer component. Of course, also companies like B2B companies have a lot of products coming out and so on. But as long as you think about, okay, what is the end user impact and kind of build the story around that, I think is important for the US audience to understand. Okay, one more question before we can take questions from the audience. There was very specific one about an idea to launch, to have a launch event in Lapland. So, is it realistic to have journalists come to Lapland for an event? Or it doesn't even have to be Lapland. It can also be in Helsinki. Like anyway, like is it realistic to get like journalists come if their traveling is you know paid for some extent at least? What do you guys think?
I mean, yeah. I mean, invite me to Lapland as well. Yeah, they do come to events, especially if you pay their flights and accommodation and stuff. For example, what they do, well, for example, I used to work at Slush as their lead comms, and we paid their journalists their flights and accommodation, so they would come. So it matters a lot that they want to come to Finland. But if you're hosting a press event, usually I think we always get there a few journalists that are interested if the story itself is interesting enough. Let's say we published the Finnish startup community almost a year ago at the Supercell's new office. So we used both the kind of, okay, we have this new community for startups, but we're also letting you see the new Supercell office. And every journalist I invited did come there for those.
Yeah, so offering them something unique that they would get.
Yeah, it comes down to that if you pay for them, and then there's actually some newsworthy, or there's some experience that they wouldn't experience themselves otherwise.
Yeah, and I think, as we move away from the pandemic, there's events happening all over the world right now. So you have to be strategic in the time slot that you book your event. So if you're like really into tech and then you want to have a tech event in Lapland, but it's at the same time as like CES, then you're going to have a bad time. You know, you're not going to get the journalists there because they're going to be at CES. So I think having that like free slot in the calendar, and then really giving them like a really long lead time so that they can plan their own travels and fit it around their work and everything like that is major.
Sweet, thank you so much. So now we still have time for questions. Oh, immediately one hand. You brave one. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, thank you for the talk and discussion. My question is, like, what if you're really early and you probably don't have budget for paid advertisement and even for hiring a PR agency? So how can you start? How do you earn Twitter followers or like whatever platform you choose?
Yeah, I think it's really being active in your communities and developing new communities. So using the internet to find those, and really trying to think. If you can work on your messaging, I think that's the most important thing. So get everyone to understand what it is that you do and the purpose of why you're doing it. I think that's very important. But then, join these different communities and really speak to different people in those. And a lot of these things that we were speaking about today are maybe a bit like time heavy or resource heavy, but they can be done also like quite lightweight. So if you want to get like an opinion piece published, that can be done if you're strategic in the places that you search for and where you try to get it like featured in. So that can be one way of kind of kickstarting your operations.
I mean, maybe one example that I really love. You may know Oguilve, the Finnish startup, and I think in the beginning they didn't have a lot of budget, and they started to do this kind of founder-led LinkedIn posts, which they're still doing. And I think that's your opinion. You may be, you may not have money, but you always have like something to post on LinkedIn, and that kind of starts building itself. And I think that was a really smart way of doing PR with a very low budget. And they got the reach, and they then got the funding after that. So that's one example.
Yeah. I could share another one. So, and I think this one has had an impact on me since I was, also part of the community. But, back in the day, and you're still part of Maria 01 as a service partner, but I remember, having these sessions with Steve, who is one of the, guys working at San Francisco, and also Valo-san. But I remember that, we had this exercise, and he was just asking me, because, we had this set of journalists coming to Slush one year, and he was like, if you really want to help, the community, like, ask him things that might give you like unexpected answers. And I remember one of the questions that we asked the community was like, what is an unexpected thing about you that people wouldn't think that you do? And I still remember one person answering that how she actually got the initial funding to start her company was by selling like a super rare Moomin mug. And I thought that, oh, this is actually like quite a an interesting story about how to raise that initial money to perhaps like set up your company. And I remember sharing that with some of these journalists coming to Slush. There was interest from a Korean, reporter. Of course, it didn't end up somewhere, but what I wanted to share with this example is that ask yourself these questions, like, what are the things that people don't actually really know about us, like what's really like odd or weird or funky about us, and think whether that is something that you can combine with what you do, and just pitch it. I mean, email is free, so I would always just give it a try. So yeah, I would say that exercise was really cool. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think we have covered it quite well. Well,
yes.
We actually have just time for our last question, which is, everybody wants to know about the bloopers. Like, who has done and what? Something that you've been afterwards like, oh my God, did I actually do that? Who would like to share their story? Oh, nice.
How long do we have? I mean, well, in the beginning, no idea how to pitch a story to a journalist, I was writing these long-ass messages in email, like telling the whole story, like, oh my God, this is amazing, you know, this. I was working at Junction then, and we were kind of this student-led hackathon, and that's where I started to do PR. I was like, you know, writing up long messages, and that's a huge mistake. Like, journalists are super busy, they have a lot on their plate. The best way to write a pitch is, you know, do bullet points. Tell what it is, why it's important, why would you be interested in, you know, reading about it, or why would the journalist be interested in writing about it, and give a little context to the story. And that's the best way to kind of form a pitch. No stories, bullet points.
Yeah. That's good. Anything else? Tim, I'm looking at you as well.
One of the best like hashtags to follow on Twitter is PR fail. PR fails. You see a lot of interesting stuff there. And I've heard a lot of horror stories in my time as well of companies doing things like, yeah, we're going to offer an exclusive to the Financial Times, but yeah, well, let's pitch to TechCrunch and to Sifted and to whatever at the same time. And we're kind of like, well, do you understand what the word exclusive means, you know? So that's quite a bad one, but there's some other ones like, people have sent like an email distributing the press release and then forgotten to attach the press release to the email, and then have had to send another email to like 300 journalists going, and here's the attached press release. So yeah, there's been some good ones like that.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a small one, but somehow this made me laugh. I had been pitching and then distributing a story about a taxi app that was launching in Europe. And then I got a response from a journalist, and you're like, ooh, a response, good. And the journalist replies, I'm not really sure how this is relevant for Kentucky bus industry. He was working for there's a media outlet for Kentucky bus industry, for everyone's knowledge. So he was like, I'm not sure how this is relevant. And I really wanted to reply. I'm like, I don't know either. This really isn't. I'm sorry for spamming. We always tell that don't spam the journalist, make your research, make sure that your story is relevant. And yeah, oh well, things happen. Hey, I think we have actually run out of time. So before we wrap up, everybody give a big hand to our panelists. So I actually left just two more things. One thing is that there was a question about where can you start if you don't know anything about PR. How do I start? How do I pitch? And so on. Well, now you have an answer. So I will leave this QR code up. It leads to Valosan's own pitching guideline. It's a free downloaded guidebook that really gives you tangible tips on how you can start pitching to journalists and what you should consider, and there are examples of pitching emails you can do and so on. Perfect. I see already a lot of phones. That's a good sign. I will leave this up. But before that, just a reminder that San Francisco agency is a Maria 01 partner, so we are having office hours today. So if you want to have a free 30-minute slot to kind of spar a bit and consult me or Tim about your PR activities, come and I think there's some slots still left for today. So if you want to come and have a chat with us, come and talk to us. All right. That was it for today, folks. Thank you so much for coming, and stay. There might be still maybe coffee, maybe something, have something, and come and talk to us. Thank you so much.